Hey guys, it's your local high school government teacher here. Whip out that pocket constitution and let's talk about executive actions. All right, we're having a big thing right now with Joe Biden in office of executive action after executive action. Man, his pen is running out of ink so fast. These babies are flying off his desk. So what does that actually do? Is it something to be concerned about? A lot of people weren't concerned about the last 45 presidents when they did these things. So let's talk about executive actions. Number one, the executive branch controls the executive branch. Yeah, that makes sense, right? So the chief executive, anything he does applies to the executive branch at the law enforcement and regulations section of the government. He does not pass laws. He cannot pass laws. Laws and regulating your daily life that power belongs to Congress. Congress passes laws. Congress regulates the economy, or at least it's supposed to. Congress does the taxes, or at least they're supposed to. Congress does treaties and declares war, or at least they're supposed to. What we've seen a lot of, lately especially, is Congress delegating its powers to the president. If they can't decide on something, they're like, you know what, you just go do that. Now, they don't have to announce publicly that they're delegating the power. They can meet privately with the president and go, hey, look, man, we're going to turn the other way, and you do what you need to do, all right? Go in there and hang on, that's the bell. I am on my lunch break. Let me make that official. Okay. Congress passes loosely worded administrative or regulatory laws, and they give enforcement discretion to the president. This way, you could have a basic guideline on the book, but every 4 years, or as the president decides to change, we can shift with the flow and the desires of the American people. Keep in mind, Congress is elected to 2-year terms. Congress is going to be changing, well, the House of Representatives changes every 2 years so that it stays current, so that it stays constant with the movement and the desires of the people. It follows the trends and the patterns of the population. The president's going to serve for 4 years. The president's going to be there a little bit longer. He's supposed to be more stable, getting us going in a direction that is slower and more, we can rely on what's coming next year. And then you have the Senate serving for 6-year terms. Now, the Senate will outlast the presidential term. Every senator will go through a presidential election because the president's only 4 years. Senate is supposed to really slow things down. And that's where you're supposed to find your grown-ups, your doctors, your millionaires, your people who have been around, your older people who've been around for a while, who really know what they're doing, your wiser, more experienced people. In theory, that's the Senate. So your House of Representatives is constantly just trying to get on TV, constantly up for re-election, constantly trying to mug a camera. But then your senators, half of you don't know who they are because they're there for 6 years. They're in no hurry. They're hiding out of the way. And so when you have this constant change house, can't agree with this really slow stability house, and they can't come up with a plan, they just go, hey, 4-year guy, take care of it. And if you do it right, awesome, you'll get reelected. And if you do it wrong, you get fired. That's cool because at least I keep my job. All right, so that is the layman's term nutshell of how all this government stuff works. Most of the stuff President Biden is doing right now is delegated to him from someone else, or at least acquiescing is the word we use, where if you act and Congress doesn't do anything, it's kind of like implied consent. You know, you eat a cookie or something and your mom's like, well, you didn't ask me about that. Well, you didn't say no. Okay, well, you're doing it. Let's just go with it. Right? We've all been in those kind of situations. So let's take a look at different types of executive actions, because they're not all executive orders. You have the president is in charge of millions of employees. He's got a huge branch, and he determines what goes on with his employees, just like your boss determines the dress code in your office, determines whether you can work from home or not, and determines basically the culture of how your office is going to run. So the president can do things like executive memorandums. These are actions, policies, practices, or whatever of government agencies. And so executive memorandums could be real simple things, like I'm looking for my list of examples of memorandums. Recently, he has passed memorandums on like how the federal government will review regulations. All right. He didn't change regulations. He changed how we're going to view them, how we're going to enforce them. So if I get a new principal and they change how I should post my lesson plans, then that's what I have to do, right? So if the president is in charge of what comes through the ports and the docks and international trade, it'll just change what we're looking for or how we want to enforce it. Turn your back on this because, increase fees or increase the pressure and paperwork on this to discourage it. Memorandums, the DACA, the DREAMER Act, extend the stays of people. What did he change? How we're going to enforce it. Hey, stop chasing them down. Right? Another memorandum is halt deportations of Liberians. For some reason, we were deporting Liberians at a higher rate. Well, let them stay. We formed that nation anyway, right? Liberia was formed by us under James Monroe to help freed slaves return to Africa. Take that how you want to take it, but we created Liberia. We're kind of supposed to take care of them. So we're going to start doing that. Expand access to global abortions. With a presidential memorandum, no laws changed. Trump had said, hey, look, if you're doing birth control, reproductive things, and you're working on American money should not go towards that. So if you mention abortions or provide abortions, we will cut off our funding to that. Well, Joe Biden, because those are his employees, has now said, okay, you can talk about it again. You can do it again, and I'll give you your money back. Memorandum. It's not changing laws or anything. Then you have a presidential directive. A presidential directive is an action either by giving to him a constitution power or statutory law or Congress or the judicial branch or something has put him in charge of this. This carries a lot more weight because it can sometimes get beyond the scope of just his interdepartment people who work for him in his building and how they're supposed to behave. With a presidential directive, we're starting to move outside of the executive branch and affect people on the outside. Now, if he gets carried away with this kind of thing, Congress can override him and stop his directive if they'll pass a law and do their jobs. Sorry, that's my opinion snuck out of here. Or if they can directly repeal what he said with a 2/3 majority, they can go, no. No, we don't like that. We're not going to do that anymore. The directive could be something like, we're going to reopen registration for Obamacare. Well, now that affects people outside, right? And it comes to find out that up to 15 million people are eligible for Obamacare, and they missed open enrollment in November. There was a 6-week open enrollment period, and 15 million people declined or for some reason did not enroll. Well, we want to open it back up for 2 more weeks because a lot of these guys, I think something like 9 million, should be eligible, or we estimate would be eligible for either free or subsidized health care. Where's that money going to come from? The stimulus package. We're waiting on Congress to pass that because that's Congress's job. But if that money is made available through the stimulus package, then regulating this, the president can get this stuff out and move it to the people, right? So if Congress will pass the money and give it to him, he can do what he wants to with it. And now he spends that out on the Obamacare people, right? I hope that's making sense. I'm getting kind of tongue-tied here. Sorry. We have presidential proclamations where the president just lets you know that stuff is there. This is basically a ribbon-cutting ceremony for a building that's already built and already in operation. Hey, today is National Hot Dog Day. Hey, today we salute our veterans. Hey, today we should all go sniff someone's hair. Or what? Maybe that was inappropriate. It recognizes events, triggers implementation of an action, that kind of thing. Presidential proclamations. Here's one recently. Biden proclaimed that we are ending travel bans from some Muslim nations that Trump had proclaimed we were stopping in the name of fighting terrorism, or however you want to interpret that. It's a proclamation. Well, y'all can come back in now, right? What actually changed? Not much. He's just proclaiming y'all come on back, right? Pulling funds from the border wall. Was that any really big deal? No. Trump had a budget, and he took money from his budget and put it on the wall, and Biden just proclaimed, hey, look at me, I took the money back. Wasn't a big deal. We all knew it was going to happen. No real legislation changed. We just redid the budget and issued it in a big, fancy termed executive proclamation to say, hey, look what I did, right? And be like me posting my lesson plans on the wall and issuing an executive proclamation that I posted my lesson plans. Well, great, that's your job. Not that big a deal, All right. Another one is travel restrictions to Europe, Brazil, and South Africa. Because of new strains of coronavirus, we have open travel from some countries to counter what Trump did, and then immediately banned travel of non-citizens coming in from a lot of European nations, some of our biggest allies like Great Britain, and then Brazil and South Africa and several other places. Did he actually do anything? Nah, not really. I mean, he's telling his people, hey, screen these people as they come in, but it's not like a law or anything. It could go away any minute now. It's just a proclamation. If you're coming from these countries, be ready. All right, now here's the big dog, an executive order. An executive order carries the weight of law. He's going to tell his branch, I want this, and if you catch anybody doing this, we're going to impart criminal repercussions to this. We're going to bring in the criminal side of things, right? Executive order. Let's see. Good executive order. He's passed 25 so far. 25 executive orders, including stuff like banning the use of private prisons. If I catch anyone in private prisons. But here's the thing. Alabama yesterday just signed a lease to 2 privately owned prisons. So is Alabama's governor in trouble? Well, Biden's executive orders only apply to the executive branch, the federal executive branch. And now he can say, we're not going to give any funding to Alabama. We're going to cut off all funding across the board because Alabama is using private prisons. He can't do that. Wouldn't be too good for him. But that's his job to control the federal prisons. Cannot be privately run now. So if you have a privately run federal prison and he gives an executive order, you better come up with a plan to get out of that prison and do something else with it. If he gives an executive order to close down Guantanamo and he finds out there are still people being held in Guantanamo Bay prison, they can all be court-martialed, right? This one is the big dog, the serious one. So this is what we're looking at. Presidential orders are commonplace. Just because he said something doesn't really mean it was anything that really affects you. It could just be housekeeping stuff. Could be dress codes. Could be, hey, you cannot discriminate against certain people as long as they're qualified. Well, yeah. But he does have the power to do this. If it's an executive order, pay attention to those because those carry the weight of law with criminal penalties. But they're not laws. That's the thing. Congress can override them, and the next guy in line can change them. But until one of those happen, it's the temporary law of the land. Hope this clears up a little bit and just helps you understand. You don't have to worry about everything you hear on the news. Just look out for that big executive order word. All right, you guys take care.